I'm Rob Ray, and you're watching Pax8 Live.
The channel ecosystem needs an event like Beyond because no one's ever brought the ecosystem together in the way Beyond is going to do so.
We haven't built an event of this nature before. Pax8 is putting on Beyond, I think, to show how serious we are to support our partners, and we're showcasing incredible information here at this event. There's going to be speakers and presentations that you're not going to want to miss. There's going to be in the moment information that you're going to want to take away and implement into your business that you're not going to be able to get after the fact. You're going to want to see who's going to be there and network with those individuals.
MSPs spend a lot of money and energy vetting out vendors and choosing the solutions that they actually want to go and work with. When you have user conferences, it allows the MSP the opportunity to see the vision and the focus and the future, and in essence what it is that they're paying for, and making sure that that vendor that they've selected is constantly moving forward. I think what Beyond does is a couple different things. First of all, talks a lot about what Pax8 is doing, focusing on our future and where we're going, but it also includes all of the vendors that are on the line card, some that aren't on the line card, so you can also see the future of where they are all going. Think of it as a one-stop shop, the ability to come in here and get vision and focus and energy and investments and innovation from all these different vendors in one place in 2.5 days.
Why is Beyond so important to the IT channel? And I'd say the answer is it's different than every other channel event that you've ever been to. With Beyond, we're aggregating the top vendors in the world and the top partners in the world, and we're bringing them all together into one place. And as far as I know, that's never been done before. And this is the first time that you're going to see a vendor agnostic event in the channel with 1,000+ MSPs interacting with those vendors. I think it's a really cool time for us to see how we can do these events differently and how we can create this killer ecosystem of vendors and partners.
Typically for our events, it's a few months and then it's up and running, but for Beyond, we started this planning back in September almost. Pax8 is putting on Beyond, I think, to show how serious we are to support our partners, and we're showcasing incredible information here at this event. There's going to be so many sessions that partners can attend where they're going to learn about how to grow their business, how to support their business, how to protect their business. And I think Beyond is going to really show that we're ready and prepared to take our partners' success to the next level.
I think the most interesting part about the Beyond conference is the commitment from the Pax8 team to want to execute something that is of immense value.
I think what's going to make Beyond special is the dedication that we have to up-leveling our MSP partners. They're going to be able to grow their business in a meaningful way, in a measured way, that when I see some of these other big events, they're highlighting the sponsors, they're highlighting the host, and this show is just so dedicated to the MSP that that's what's going to separate itself.
Probably the greatest reason why an MSP should come to Beyond is that peer-to-peer experience. We're going to have 1,000 MSPs from all over the world sitting in there, and you're going to learn more by talking to the guy sitting next to you than you will sitting through any session. The networking opportunities, the ability to meet somebody else, because whatever's keeping you up at night, somebody else has solved. And that interaction, that peer interaction, the ability to learn from your peers, what problems did they solve, what problems can you help them solve, that is going to be the greatest part of this gathering.
Here at QBP Q2 2023.
QBP and our SKO specifically are meetings that you certainly don't want to miss out on. This is just a great opportunity for vendors to engage with every one of our sales reps, to present and really talk about their solutions and where they win. It's just a great opportunity to build those relationships and really kick off on the right foot.
I hope you enjoy what we have in store for you here.
To me, I just feel like it's a really uplifting event that we all get together for and really gives us energy throughout the rest of the quarter.
Keeper and Malwarebytes here were our vendor sponsors for this event. We're really excited to have them on. We've been getting a lot of requests, and partners have basically been begging for us to bring them on for months now. Feels like a long time in the making.
We are absolutely thrilled to be here. This is a partnership that's been on my roadmap since I joined Keeper about 3 years ago. Working with MSPs, we just get so much interest in, do you guys work with Pax8? And what about Pax8? And just meeting all the sellers here and being a part of this event, it was kind of a no-brainer for us.
I mean, the sales people at Pax8, I feel like I'm back at the Malwarebytes headquarters. I mean, it's a very good team environment. From a vendor perspective, you really try to look at other partners that kind of like-minded. I think it's a mutual partnership. I love it. I mean, I think there's a lot of MSPs that were working with Malwarebytes that were waiting for this, ink to dry.
When you hear MSP, you think Pax8. MSPs are already very technical. They're very smart people. They don't start these businesses because they don't know what they're doing, but they come to a trusted advisor like a Pax8 so that they can really find the best in breed solutions to build up their stack. That's what Pax8 does so beautifully and like no one else.
So getting in front of the sales teams, connecting with them in person, and really getting them excited about the product is priceless.
I am more of a visual learner, so it is really nice having vendors in person where you're able to just connect with them, talk with them, and get to know them as a resource that we can reach out to.
It's been a blast. Everybody's just been really excited to have us here, and lots of, thank you for coming and thank you for sponsoring. And we're like, no, thank you for having us.
We love the channel, guys. Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, we're all great channels. I was watching Channel 11 last night as food for. No.
It's unique to come across a couple vendors that really align well with our culture and just blend with our people right away. So yeah, just lots of excitement with our sales teams, and we're excited to see where the future goes with these two partnerships.
Let us demystify and simplify for you. Unravel Modern Workplace, Azure, Power Platform, you name it, we're gonna simplify it. Join us weekly for Technically Unraveled on Pax8 Live. Don't be afraid of the tech that your business needs to succeed.
Many people ask me what's the meaning behind Pax8. Pax8 means peace and luck.
शांतता आणि नशीब.
Meer makes me.
Sulh ve uhur.
Vrede en geluk.
Rauha ja onni.
Barış ve şans. Peace and luck.
Paix et chance.
Nederlander at.
Fred och lycka.
Vrede en geluk.
Fred och lycka.
Pace și noroc.
Paz e sorte.
Friede und Glück.
Mír a štěstí.
Paz e sorte.
Paix et chance.
Taikos ir sėkmės.
Pax8, peace and luck.
What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we discuss all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of for the last week. We have a very special episode for you today, broadcasting on all possible channels so that we can make sure you get this content. Later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Andrew Morgan and Rob Ray, and we're going to be unpacking what's going down in the security track at Pax8 Beyond. Be a little bit of a sneak preview, but with that in mind, make sure you reserve your seat for Pax8 Beyond today. You can sign up at pax8beyond.com. Come join us for 2 days of Power Pack sessions, keynotes, breakaways, and a lazy river to boot. With that in mind, let's jump straight into the news. What's up, Matt?
Man, Dom, I am excited about this episode. In fact, after the next 20 minutes or so, you and I may actually speak the least on this episode, period, ever. It's nuts. So if y'all are listening and watching right now on all the different platforms, on LinkedIn and YouTube, just understand we will be going back to only YouTube. So if you like what you're seeing, if you're happy with the content, subscribe to the Pax8Cloud YouTube channel as well. But for today, we have something I've been very excited about. I've had to keep it under wraps. But let's get to the news. Stick around with us after the news, and we'll have Rob Ray and Andrew Morgan on to talk about some awesomeness happening in June. So let's go to the first article. So on this first article, Dom, you said this, right? You called this into existence. We talked about it last week. We met with Wes Spencer and said, hey, what happens when we stop paying ransom? What happens when these threat actors have a lower ROI, which we're seeing in some of the most recent reports, we're seeing because of some of the disruption? Well, what did you propose, Dom?
Yeah, we talked a lot about and I used the word brutality because I meant it, right? The brutality of what these threat actors are doing, moving in the upward direction as the ransom payments move down. And I literally, this hit my inbox right after we wrapped last week's show. And it's a really terrifying and sad story, but it's really relevant to what we were talking about. And, I wish I wasn't right, but we're right here. And we see here the students in the Minneapolis school district incident. There's now all kinds of information coming out of that, including some extremely private information to kids, staff,
like psychological reports. Imagine telling your student counselor about your home life and that being publicized. Let's just dig into what that implication means to a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, right? And now Publix, I just, I'm getting tingles because it's, you already have interesting family dynamics playing out a lot of times in schools. And now to have, therapist notes available and published because the school district didn't pay or whatever reason it is, I think you're seeing,
a lot of
to your
dirty
point,
laundry.
that brutality jump. Yeah.
It's terrifying. And I really hope the point of us sharing this is to drive this home, that this is a real thing. And we really need to be thinking about this. These are the real world implications, right, of a cyber incident. When the threat actor is not pleased, so to say.
Well, let's take this out to just a little bit of a thought experiment, right? How many 3-person therapist office that serve maybe 100, 140 patients actually say, won't happen to me, doesn't matter, I'll just pay the ransom, I have insurance, this is where it does matter. And just to explain what's happening here for anybody that's not maybe as technical or doesn't understand this, normally what happens as a ransomware is we encrypt stuff. It means it's not accessible. We take it away from you, you can't use it. But people have ways to respond to that. They have backup now. They can restore. They can get back up to running. But when you started after 2019, I think May's ransomware gang in December was the first to do this. They started extorting data. They sent it out before they did the ransomware to say, I now has your data and I'll release it if you don't pay. And this is an example of that, right? And now they're taking it down to a school district, therapy notes, teacher home addresses, student information that they've harvested. They now are saying, oh, they didn't pay? Let's prove it to you. And they released the data. And so you now have this outplay of a lot of impact in lives that comes from that. That is,
and this is a marked change
too.
I think it's important to point out, because in the past, we've seen certain ransomware gangs maybe attack a hospital or a healthcare facility, and immediately renege that and give the decryption key, because it wasn't their intent to harm public infrastructure or public safety. And this is a huge, massive pivot from that, where they've literally released, psychological records of, like you said, 10 and 12-year-olds, and in Canada they released photos of cancer patients
but look
during
at
treatments.
Look at the climate back then, though. When that first happened, when people started reacting that way, there were arrests happening. Department of Justice was freezing funds. You had things coming back. You were starting to see an impact, and the threat actors said, oh, we don't want a kinetic war. We don't want this to turn
Right.
that way. And this was
Right.
also right after Israel had done their first kinetic actually
Right.
response to a cyber event, which was back during the Iron Dome incident. But the point
Right.
being is that, we are seeing this escalate. We will continue to see this escalate. The only answer is to be faster at stopping it, having the ability to control what data they access, limiting what access is there. And by golly, if you're holding students' patient notes, maybe be more secure with that than you are necessarily with the lunch schedule, right? And I think that's
Right.
part
Right.
of that
Right.
ever-growing understanding of cybersecurity efforts. I
Right.
digress. Okay, let's move on to the second one. We beat this to death. This actually
Right.
was something that I want to talk about. This article says ransomware attack forces Dallas to shut down courts, disrupts some 911 services. When this first came out, I saw it first in the Intel community channels and some of those private channels. And it was coming from the ransomware gangs themselves and some of their posts. And the interesting part of that was there was this hyperbole statement of the entire city of Dallas is down. Everything isn't working. All system functions are down. They're having to write. They even described in this one hacker's boast, threat actor's boast, that said they're having to handwrite paper 911 calls. Right. That was the hyperbolous part that we saw there. And there was some skepticism, but it does seem that at least in some cases, the city of Dallas is put in a position where they have enough system dependence, they have enough things together that this ransomware event is impacting some forms of their services, but not specifically dispatch function and that. But,
It's
what are your
important to
thoughts on this,
understand that
Tom?
these are highly complicated environments. Like if you think of all
Sure.
when you call 911, the amount of infrastructure you're lighting up before your call gets to a call taker, and then the amount of infrastructure they're lighting up to get help your way is massive. There's a lot of pieces in the middle, from your telephone carrier to the PSAP, to the systems that route your
Yep.
call to a dispatcher. It's a massive system. So if you take any one of those out, obviously there's an impact. But I think what we've seen is, particularly in larger metropolitans like Dallas, I know Denver has contingency plans here, and I'm sure a lot of other cities do, that they have ways that they can continue to serve the public if those
Yeah.
systems aren't working as intended. And I
What's
think
that
that's what we're
term?
seeing
If you're
here.
planning for that, Dom, what is that term if you're planning for that in the enterprise world? You want to try to take a stab at the
Incident
acronym? I'll say the acronym.
response.
That's that, but
Oh,
let's
go ahead.
continue it on for the further aspect.
And
It's
disaster
COOP,
recovery.
COOP,
Okay. Yeah.
which stands for continuity of operations, right? And so you're talking about
Yes.
having this ability to have not just a disaster plan, but then how do I keep functioning? How do I keep running this business at the 3-month, at the 2-month, at the 2-week, at the 5-month, at the 6-month mark? And so when you start thinking about cities in this situation, you would think they have a lot of that. I will say I had breakfast with my former FBI handler, if you will, I suppose, yesterday or 2 days ago, and he was talking about a case in Dallas that he did in the late 90s, and they were coming in and taking a whole copy of their groupware mail server. And they said they couldn't take it down because everything in their whole world would be down, that they would have no ability to function. They fought it in subpoena. And the whole point of this, which is interesting, is just, they've proven they've done non-resilient systems in the past, I guess is my point. So it's possible there's some impact from that.
That's fair.
But if you're listening at home, I think the takeaway from this news article, always about ransomware or about any type of incident, or to your point, disaster of any nature, you start getting into, what does your resiliency look like? How can I continue operations? At what point can I not continue operations, right? If I lose these systems, what impact does that make? What's my cash flow look like? What are the challenges to that as we continue to run business? Can I even keep the doors open? You know how I know this? Because I've seen where they can't. And I've seen those companies close doors, and those companies have sued me before. I've dealt with this in a very personal and professional basis. And to watch people
we can
cry and
expand
talk
that
about how
out
their
because
40
there's
employees don't
been-
get fed,
Right. And there's also been cases of smaller municipalities, or even decent size, but not Dallas scale, that they were shut down. Like they could not answer 911 or provide calls for service, and sheriff's departments were having to swoop in and take over. And like that's real world impact. Like the scenario in there is you call 911 and there is nobody there to take the call, right? Like that's what we're talking about. So again, it's the seriousness of the other side of the boom, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's wrap up this last article. I hope it's a more comical or more fun one. I don't believe that it will be, unfortunately, but we have our acronym
find
counter,
it a
right,
little
Dom?
funny.
Let's get a repeat offender calculator up on the top of the board. Anyone that keeps repeat offender, like say, I'm looking at you, Palo Alto. I'm looking at you, T-Mobile. But we're on, I think, the second this year, and I believe the third in 1 year. Correct? I think we had one last year with
I think
T-Mobile.
it's the third
Correct
in
me
a
if I'm wrong.
12-month period, the second
Correct.
in 2023, and I think it's at least the fourth historically. I think. Don't quote me, but I think it's the fourth historically.
Serendipitously, we had a Malwarebytes ad pop up as a run by. That's pretty nice, but no, that was unintended. But seriously though, this is one of those things where, when you think about it today, showing a track record and a continued track record, especially as a publicly traded company, is going to have ramifications. If you look back, March last year, the SEC stepped out and said, hey, maybe we should do something like what we did with Sarbanes-Oxley. Right after Sarbanes-Oxley, they made a requirement that you had to have someone on your board that had financial understanding of what was going on. You had to attest to it. You had to have the ability to say that. Why? So they could get the handcuffs, right? You had to have someone knowing they made an executive decision to do the wrong thing and to commit fraud. And you saw that play out with Uber's CISO, right? They just now, actually, we found out he's not going to jail today. I don't know if you saw that, but Uber's CISO, he got it. He got off from a basic. They waived the time. So, short story is, you're starting to see more and more of this roll up with the SEC. There are people clamoring right now to try to meet some of the new SEC regulations around having someone on your board that understands cyber, reporting cyber incidents, with some preposterous numbers proposed, like 4 hours to report a cyber incident.
Right.
You don't even know what color the paint is of the car that hits you yet by 4 hours, right? Like, anyways, I digress. What are your thoughts on this one, Dom? T-Mobile for the number 4.
I don't know. T-Mobile is also a big noisemaker and a big mover in this industry. They just bought Mint. So it's really, I don't know. I don't even know what to think about it because it's almost,
you know why Verizon doesn't have this problem?
Usual. Why is that?
It's because Scott Chasen's company ProtectWise got bought, and they're protecting those.
They're protecting them.
Oh,
I like that. I like that.
I digress. But yeah,
but no, this is a
seriously
though
though.
Incident, and T-Mobile is now, I believe, the biggest cell phone carrier in the United States.
Yep.
Between the Sprint and the Mint acquisitions, right? So this is a big deal every time it happens, and we don't know the inner workings. We never will, but something is going massively wrong over and over again.
Why? You know why that data is so juicy? So think about it this way. I compromised Dom's password, right? What's the next step I need to fight most MFAs?
Text message.
Yeah. Well, most of the time we've seen SIM swapping, we've seen SIM jacking, we've seen PSTN attacks. But you know what? It makes it a lot easier if I already know your name, your secret password potentially for what you call in with, who actually owns this phone number, maybe the full number if all I have is the last of 0267 and I don't have the full number to add that.
Right.
You could see a world where having that data gives you a lot of OSINT or open source intelligence capability that's come from these breaches.
Not to mention
and these
call
these
logs,
expos.
cell tower pings, like all that.
Who do I want
all
to
that
attack?
information
Who's
that,
close
that
to
a
you?
three-letter might subpoena about you if they were trying to figure out where you were. They could probably access that in the right type of incident, right? So,
100%. Yeah. And I don't know that this one's
juicy
that
target
way.
for nation states too. We don't know. No.
Yeah. But I will say 4 or 5, like at some point they've got to find the crown jewels, right? I mean, you can only poke through the infrastructure so many times. Well, listen, I'm super excited. If you would, let's kick over to the brilliant Robin Harris. She's got some great words of wisdom for us. And then, man, I'm going to be excited to announce the 2 people with us today because we're going to show y'all some cool stuff that we're doing in June. So let's kick over to Robin Harris.
So let's talk a little bit about AI. And AI, artificial intelligence, it's becoming more integrated in our life. It just cracks me up when I see my sister talking to her phone and, asking, hey, what's this? Hey, Siri, do this. Hey, Alexa. It's just all over the place. But we have to understand that AI, it can be a double-edged sword for us, because if we haven't done due diligence in putting in those foundational security measures, AI can open the door for a lot of things to go wrong. A lot of things to go wrong. We could be headed toward, I'm not talking Terminator type thing, but believe me, I mean, you think about cars that drive, cars that park, all computers have to be concerned about bad actors and threats. So when you introduce AI, you've introduced another sophisticated layer. And if you don't have your basic security functions in place, what's the likelihood that you're going to have those advanced security functions operating effectively? It's just not likely. And the other thing we need to think about with AI is when you bring AI in, who owns the rights? You know, like when you do something and you're leveraging AI to produce something for you, who owns the rights to those creations? I saw a friend using the AI to do all of these fantastic fantasy-based pictures and all this other kind of stuff. And she never thought to read the line. She signed away her rights. She no longer owns those images, and they can do whatever they want to them whenever they want. To me, that was not a good deal. She should not have operated on that platform, because basically her pictures could show up in all kinds of places where she doesn't want them to show up because she signed her rights away. So AI is we need to use it responsibly, and AI, it's artificial. Please understand, it's artificial intelligence. Now, here's just my take on it. We have yet to even explore human intelligence. We're only using a small fraction of our mental capabilities. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we need to understand that it's humans who create it, who are using a fraction of their intelligence, creating an artificial simulation of that level of intelligence. So there's some risk there. We need to consider. There's some ethics that we need to consider. Even, when you talk about using artificial intelligence to make decisions about who gets what job, who gets what promotion, who's suitable for this, who are we going to be kind to, who are we going to be mean to, who are we going to exclude, who are we going to include. We can actually program biases and risk into our artificial intelligence, because the master architect is a human being, and humans, as far as I know, are not perfect. So when we use AI, let's do it ethically, intelligently, and securely. That's my take on it.
As always, amazing words, right? I mean, and I think some things that were called out in that are AI is still oftentimes guided by a human. The data sets that are exposed, the things and the way they're exposed and how they're codified often has the input of bias potentially.
Though
Great call out.
I'm not so sure about the not Terminator stuff, because did you see where ChatGPT went and hired people to do captchas on Fiverr? So it's also that part scares me just a little, just a little.
Just this much? Just a smidge?
Just a smidge.
Well, you know what? We're learning how to defend ourselves against these things and how to have a, active and functional security capability as an MSP. And so one of the things that I'm super excited about, and maybe this is the first time you've heard this, Heath and Eric, I see you guys in the audience. It's awesome to have you here. But we've got Andrew Morgan and Rob Ray. Now, you might ask yourself, why? Well, Pax8 Beyond is coming up very soon, and Rob Ray and Andrew Morgan got something really cool cooking up. So let's just get right into it. Rob and Andrew, why don't you tell us what you got planned for us? Let's get started on this and kind of where this began, even if you'd like to.
Who should be the one that kind of lets the cat out of the bag here? Like, should it be Andrew? Should it be myself? What do you think here?
Y'all could arm wrestle
real quick.
Yeah, Rochambeau. I'm good with that. Let's go, Andrew. You tell us. You break it loose, Andrew. What are we doing, buddy?
Well, seeing that it's, first off, it's great that the band's back together. It's always a pleasure to be working with Rob and Matt and Dom. So Rob, was kind enough to come to me following Write a Boom 2023 and say, hey, we're putting on Pax8 Beyond, and what do you think about curating, an awesome security venue for that, a security track? And I didn't have to think twice. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And Rob, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think I've been a Write a Boom now for since the beginning. I've seen it evolve. I've seen it grow. I've seen the content change and evolve and grow. And it's one of the best parts, in my mind, it's one of the best parts of our industry from an events perspective on content. So, we're doing our own user conference now in June. Why not bring that to the partners that haven't seen it or haven't had the opportunity to go to Write a Boom? So I'm excited about them coming in, participating, and a little bit more, if I can say, more mature security content than what you'll find at most conferences, including a lot of conferences that claim to be security conferences. Where they end up being a lot of sales pitches from vendors.
Sales.
Yeah, that's what I'm most excited about, is actually bringing legit security content to the MSPs without an ulterior motive in mind. And I think the way that you do it, Andrew, is just very cool. It's interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thanks, Rob.
I'll say from my view.
Go.
I'll say from my view, I went to Write a Boom. I had been to all of the security nomenclatural ones in the channel that year before. And I got to yours, and after your conference, the rest of the conferences that year changed in some way, right? And I'll say, when I went to that conference, and I'm not boosting it up that way, when I went to your conference, it was the first time it was just roll up sleeves, let's talk and learn, no talk about product, no pitch, no marketing deck, no somebody standing up and saying, we stopped 33.9%, none, just actual teaching. And it was so refreshing, because I think we're at that stage where everybody's bought in. Everybody knows security is a thing. Everybody understands we need to get moving forward and protecting ourselves. We've seen the loss. So it really is, it landed. I mean, it landed so well. I have to imagine, Andrew, that's why you did it again next year. You've got it already planned for next year. And now here we are at Pax8, delivering the same content, the same capabilities. Is an awesome partnership between you two. So why don't we, or Dom, do you have any thoughts on it? I just want to say here, because I got you, Andrew, that was an amazing job. I don't know how you pulled it off, but it was fantastic. The new
you pulled the thought right out of my head. Like, this is going to be a really practical application of actual cybersecurity work, right? And I think that's huge. I tell people, anytime someone tells me, hey, I want to get into cyber, the first words out of my mouth are like, you need to be ready to get punched in the face, right? And I think
true story.
Through these sorts of mechanisms, we can show them a little bit of like, this is the real world, right? This is what goes on, and really get people more interested, and B, understanding what cybersecurity really entails.
So Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit, or Rob? Yep, go ahead. Yeah. We're going to keep running over each other. I still love you.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for all the compliments. I got a phenomenal team, and our mission in just period is to provide awesome content and enable the channel, enable MSPs and MSSPs. There's nothing, as you said, Matt, there's nothing to sell. We sell nothing. And so, if I could just kind of talk through what we're going to do through the 2 security days here.
That's what everybody's here for.
Cool? Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's the whole show.
All right. Awesome. So I'm going to start off with day 1 and kind of give a backdrop on why we're bringing in the very awesome John Stram, Black Hills Information Security. I'm going to have Claire show a screen real quick here. And what's important to know about John is, and we can click on, by the way, the purple deck, and I'm just going to set the stage here, and you can scroll up a little bit and show the procedures and the scenarios. You may have to click on scenario tools down below, but to get it to launch, down at the bottom right, you'll see scenarios. So hopefully that comes up for us.
There we go.
And perfect. There we go. So awesome. Just a little backdrop. So why we wanted to bring in John, I'm being a little iterative here, was John's a big believer, I'm a big believer, that in order to sell security, you have to understand what you're doing internally first. You can't give somebody something you don't have first. Now, does that 100%. Mean you can't go out and secure your customers? Does that mean you can't build a stack without, knowledge? No, but it's very difficult to articulate risk to revenue conversations without understanding it first internally. Matt, you were going to say something maybe?
You hit the nail on the head. I just want to add color to that. So everybody knows our MSP lost a hard $1 million in cash and a much larger loss from that, from a ransomware incident. And we had things we were defending things, but until I started learning from the attacker's side, until I started learning from what was happening and learning from it at a deeper level, I didn't understand why we were doing what we're doing. And I think that's exactly what John Strand does really well, is try to break that barrier down. So.
Yeah, really well said, Matt. And, you know, if you look at, and some of these folks I'll mention who are MSPs that will be coming that have been victims of unfortunate circumstance, you often find those become the best at building their business, selling at the highest prices, because when you actually live through an event and go through, you know, the forensics and go through the crisis communication and have to deal with this with your customers, with breach attorneys, with getting 1,000 phone calls an hour, it becomes very real. And you have this inertia to either fight, right, or go. And most of these guys that I know have fought and fought well. So in talking about day one, we're going to have, this is going to be like the first 150 people that are going to have access to this 4-hour lab with John. And it's based on a game he created, Backdoors and Breaches, a la Dungeons and Dragons, if you will, of incident response.
It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, I have every deck.
It's
and what it is literally walking through what John deems and has built what are called the procedures. So you're seeing the procedures up top, right? Or the scenarios up top, sorry. And then the procedures below it. So based on this random roll of the dice, if you flip any of those cards up top, Claire, just click on one of them, right? We're going to be given a scenario, right? And we're going to walk through those different scenarios that we're presented with. And then we're going to have to say, you know what, we're going to take this procedure. What's that?
It's Evilgenics. That's one of my techniques that I demonstrate right there. That logo on the right. So sorry.
There you go. No, absolutely fine. And so Claire, if you pull up like endpoint detection and response, we just closed that one for a minute. You know, we know that our AV, advanced AV, now EDR, MDR is ubiquitous, right? But what John wants to do is say, you know, he understands that the MSPs are on the front lines and he wants to actually teach, right? So the fact that you have this EDR solution, what can we do with it, right? What information, what can we analyze to understand what actually may have occurred and why your customers saying what they're saying, and start to dig into that. So he's going to teach literally as we go through the scenarios. Then when he's done with that, you know, a la Robin Williams, as only John Strand can do. He's hysterically funny, right?
He is funny.
He's gonna have you go into a lab environment, and we're gonna walk through these scenarios to see if you understand what we've just gone through. Almost like a mini CTF, capture the flag. How's that acronym? Did I get a buzz?
That's an acronym. That's perfect. Well played, Mr. Morgan.
There we go. That mini capture the flag. And we're going to have team members walking around, and there's going to be some special guests there that we can't talk about yet. But in these different scenarios, we're going to elevate everybody's capability by the end. And don't think of it just tactically, right? Oh, I'm going to send my security guy. Because some of these procedures are crisis communications, Matt and Dom, right? Like, it's like,
100%.
You know, what you went through, very real. It's very real. It's very personal. And you know, we want to think through, do we have a crisis? Oh, we have an instant response plan. Okay, have you tested it? Do you have a crisis communications plan? Right? Do we understand if your customer involved in this has regulatory issue, has any type of compliance issue? Are we going to have to notify any type of regulators in this? And we're going to walk through scenarios where this isn't just for the tactical people with hands on keyboard. This is at, the executive level too, that we need to think through these things. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to make sure and codify here for anybody listening, and to set your point home, is that this is a tabletop exercise, right? You see in the
it's a
CIS
full-on board
controls
game.
call outs to do tabletops. That's what it is. Yeah, it's a tabletop exercise. It's where you need Rob, the executive, in the room to make decisions. You need Matt, the engineer, in the room to make decisions, and you have to walk through that. And so some of this, to your point, you can't do a scenario without the comms manager or someone owning that. And so the more and more you get people in there that are going to be in your org that are able to say, I'm the owner and I know now I'll be responsible for communications. I'll know that I need to have my technical director be the person that's making decisions. And I'm not saying we're getting massively deep into all of that, but you'll walk away with enough knowledge of each of the pieces through this tabletop exercise to go, I hadn't thought about
You're going to walk
that,
away
right?
with the best kind of headache because you're going to be thinking about these things, right? If you're in charge of the comms, you have to think about the words that come out of your mouth, right? Because some lawyer's going to hear those words, right? So you start to think about these bespoke areas of incident response, especially when it's a big incident. And I think a lot of people miss that when they think about this.
Yep.
Really well said, Dom. I think, the other thing is, is it the technical team and is it affecting operations? Is it affecting some piece of the, line of business, or is it specific to a device? And based on those things, right? Again, it's not just this isolated person, as Matt, and thanks for sharing, Matt. I actually, missed it, but yes, we're going to be doing ongoing tabletops here, right? And that's really what it's about. The other thing is what we've seen some of the MSPs do with this, once they understand it, not only are they using it internally to develop the skill sets in their own organization, but what we've seen organizations do, Matt, is actually get with their customers and monetize this and start to walk through scenarios. What would happen if we did this? Oh, I'm sorry. What would happen if this scenario would, occurred in the organization? Let's walk through that.
Yep. You hit it well, because tabletop exercises and having the ability to know where you're going to fail, even theoretically, for me, were always very valuable, right? You now go, ooh, I didn't have this piece. And a great example, a lot of people, when they're in a major incident, count on the PSA being available and able to go get all the users' names and call numbers of everybody they might have to talk to if they were having a massive incident. Well, they don't. It may not be available. It may be down. And so you have to think about, how do I plan for those? And when you get into tabletop exercises in general, I've had so many people take my class for CIS controls. And when you get down to that side, you ask, have you had a tabletop exercise? If you come to this event, I will finally have a yes in my class that someone has tabletopped. And I say that to say, Andrew and Rob, maybe this is a question for Rob, I don't know very many MSPs that tabletop regularly, that do it effectively, that go through these things. Do you see that as a gap in our market? Is that one of the reasons you wanted to bring this whole first day being essentially a tabletop guided exercise with John Strand?
For somebody, Matt, that's like doing this as a full-time job, like just focusing on security, and you've never seen this before, pretty safe bet I've never seen it before. And I think that's part of the reason why we want to bring in those individuals. And I think there's a couple points that I just kind of want to hit on here as well as, and I've had this conversation, Andrew and I have talked about this, and even Matt, you and I have talked about this at length, where different personas within the actual MSP, what are the needs there? We've all had friends who have gone through this before, and there's a lot of things that you don't think about when it comes to these. And again, I think part of the biggest challenge that we have in our space, and I'd be shocked if anybody on this call would disagree with me, is just the amount and the quality of content that we're getting from everywhere. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no consistency to it. It's all over the map, and it all depends, I think, a little bit on what the motivation of the delivering conference or delivering company is, I feel like being able to go and use our kind of stage to be able to come up with something that's completely neutral and hopefully immensely beneficial to the MSP, or the MSP's thinking about things that they haven't thought of before. I love that we're leveraging that, again, that stage, that platform, to be able to do that. The other thing I want to reinforce, and Andrew mentioned it very quickly, is that it is going to be limited seating. There's going to be close to, if not more than 1,000 MSPs. We're pretty close to selling it out. 1,000 MSPs at Beyond in June. We only have space in this lab for the first 150. So, I also want to be cognizant of that. And again, it's going to be probably about 4 hours on day one there, Andrew, and then carries through to the day two.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about day two now, Rob. Thanks for that segue. So what we wanted to do day two, and kind of really just the first session, is going to be with John Murchison, the CEO of Blackpoint, and we are going to be talking about what it's like. Matt, you mentioned this, like when you went through your scenario, and that's really what John's session is about, which is through the lens of a threat actor, right? They're commonly called, here comes the acronym, TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? Referred to MITRE ATT&CK, right? But we need to understand, right, what the threat actor does. If we don't understand what the threat actor does and why they do what they do, we really don't understand why the security controls we're putting in place, why a CIS framework or NIST or whatever you're doing. It's just security controls. It's just policies. It's just one-off. But we start, go ahead, man.
I like to make analogies, right? And I'll make one that I think anybody can resonate with. So it's like saying, I'm going to go coach football, defense only, and I never understand how offense is played. Right. How would you ever defend? You don't know they're going to be coming through the holes or around the end, or the rules in which a receiver can be down or not down, and the way in which you can throw the ball, or if you can touch the ball, can I lateralize? If you don't understand the way the offense is going to attack you, how silly would it be to say you could defend it? And I think that's what we've been doing so long. And I think that's why this day two start out is so valuable, is it's really what made my head go click, right? And I think you're doing it in the right order. First, let's talk about all the stuff. Second, let's talk about what an attack looks like at the end of it, what things they're doing, what's their goals, what makes them happy, what drives their world, where are the juicy bits, right? And so I think when you see it that way, you start to understand how to segment them and how you might defend. Just like I know if my left guard's getting beat, and they're coming through and they're blocking him every time, maybe he can kneel down and lessen the amount of the gap. And instead, he doesn't get driven off of that, and the two hole never becomes available, right? And so you start realizing that you can start getting compensatory and understand how to defend. And I think that's one of the things you learn through that lens, through the beginning of day two. So I'll let you continue. I just wanted to say that.
No, Matt, you're spot on. I mean, look, if you went through the, one of the 150 that gets into the lab with John Strand, and he gets to a procedure where, we're doing pivoting and escalating, by the threat actor. And now John Murchison is actually showing it on screen, through their threat ops. This is what we're literally seeing. Like, this isn't hyperbolistic. We're going to walk you through literally an attack that, they're going to replay it, basically, different scenarios of how they have to go now and isolate and get rid of that threat actor. And so if you start to understand the mindset and how the threat actor works, the security controls, the policies, right, bringing in the executive team into governance, into why we want to do this. And again, I'll use the risk to revenue conversation. Now it starts to make some more sense, right? Does that resonate with you, Don?
It does, yeah. The other thing that you add to it is, think about when you start understanding another example. A threat actor leaves a pivot, gets a pivot, then they leave a persistent foothold where they can get back in. Well, when you talk about restoring, the first thing every MSP wants to do after a ransomware event is, let's restore, get my client back up to date, let's get moving, we're good. To what day? You don't know when they
Right.
put the foothold in. And once you start to
Right.
understand that, you can go, ooh, we need to find out if there's a foothold, right, Dom? I mean, that was kind of your game, wasn't it? You
That
did
was
that for a living for the most part.
Yeah, it's the understanding. I was in crypto, so not the same game as Murchison, but you have to understand a lot of these attacks will sit for a while, right? You don't know when they have a foothold. You know when the bomb exploded. You don't know when it was planted. And I think that's a
Right.
key piece of understanding that you're going to get out of this is understanding that you can't just go into your backup console and click the green button and wrong. I was completely wrong about when that incident came in and where the foothold was. Guess what? Very next day, a new payload detonated, and we were all shocked, right? But I hadn't restored to a point where I understood that the threat actor was not in the environment yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Andrew, we got much more in store, so let's move on.
so-
What's after Murchison's amazing
Yeah,
kickoff?
so after John, then we're going to bring in Phyllis Lee, who was 25 years with the NSA, and she's
amazing.
formerly the Senior Director of Controls, now VP of Content for Center for Internet Security, or CIS. And then we're going to have Eric Woodard with her. Eric Woodard,
Racking up all the acronyms.
And the reason we're bringing in Eric is not only is he very open about the incident he survived that almost brought his MSP to its knees. He's going to go through why he became such an advocate of the CIS controls, so much so that he's gone through SAN certification of CIS. He has put in personally for the last 2 years over 1,000 hours of personal training and execution into the controls, and how he's now using it as a means to go to market for all his clients. It's the backdrop to his security offering and to his overall go-to-market strategy. So I think it's going to be really awesome for MSPs in the audience to not hear theory, but actual practicality and how it's being used, not only in his MSP and really what it's done for his confidence to be able to go out and sell.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So comments?
I got a personal story on that one. Yeah, so Eric Woodard and I serve on an emergency response team for CompTIA, where we are there to help MSPs that are going through a similar event, right? And it's because of our shared history with Robert Chaffee and a bunch of others, Jay Tipton and more. But one of the things is when I first met Eric, it was sitting out in front of a Continuum conference, if I remember correctly, and he was sitting out alone, and he wasn't in the room, and I had walked out, and I sat down next to him and said, "Hey, what's going on, man? I'm Matt. Nice to meet you." And he says, "I'm Eric." And we start chatting, and he tells me it's the first conference he's been back at. And it's been since his massive event, and he started crying, he teared up, and he got passionate. And then we spent an hour and a half talking about the things he would have done differently, the way he would have done his contracts, the way he'd have worked with organizations. And I was blessed enough to put those in place at Iconic. I was blessed enough through his benevolence, through his sharing, through his ability to talk about something that freaking hurts, right? That sucks, that's embarrassing, that makes you feel like a loser, that makes you not think you have succeeded for your clients. For him to be okay going through that pain just to share with you, if you missed that, you're crazy. It changed my life. I would spend time making sure you make that one as well. So any thoughts on that, Dom?
I just want to call out, we had Phyllis Lee on our show, what was it, 4 or 5 episodes ago. Definitely go back and watch it. She's an incredible human, and I think her combination of tactical cyber experience with what she does at CIS makes her a massive player in this space. And she's really good at illustrating the thoughts that get put behind CIS controls, right? If a new version or revision is going to come out, understand that there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think she'll do a great job giving you some insight into why the CIS controls are what they are and why they're so effective.
Yeah, really good stuff. And then Matt, you mentioned how Eric's story made you revisit contracts and things of that nature, which leads us into session 3 with a gentleman named Eric Tildes. He's the managing member of TechGC. Now, Eric, it's not often you get this, a lawyer, but he built a very successful MSP that got acquired in 2011. He and his partners built a company called NetArcs. It got bought by one of the largest MSPs, global MSPs called Logicalis, and Eric became their chief legal and risk officer, corporate compliance, for 9 years, and now he is on his own helping many of the MSPs in our community, etc. But what the session is about is a tale of two MSPs. One that decides to, in essence, I'm good. My MSAs are good. My cyber's good. I haven't reviewed it in a while, but I feel pretty good.
ChatGPT helped me set them both up, right? All the important stuff.
Exactly. My techie, etc. Right?
Yeah.
The other MSP has, really taken a dramatic interest in making sure not only is everything left of boom, left of an incident in place, but also all of the things that could be right of boom post incident in place. Are his contracts shored up? Is his cyber shored up? Is his tech E&O shored up? What kind of relationship does he have with a breach attorney? Does his incident response plan true up? Does his clients, have they gone through that process? And then he role plays, right? Literally, this is real. Like, what's the end result of these two companies that actually have gone through incidents? And you see some very different end results of these two MSPs. So that's session 3. And then we close out with a panel that you're going to be on, Matt. It's going to be moderated by the director of incident response at CrowdStrike. His name's Clark Harshbarger. He's awesome, and he is the moderator. He's going to have Carl Bickmore on. He's going to an MSP, and
Carl.
The third person is Mackenzie Brown, who used to be at the Microsoft DART. Microsoft's defense, their detection and response team.
It's another acronym.
So it's an acronym.
Absolutely.
DART. Sorry.
And so we'll close out the fourth session, speaking to individuals that have actually, worked through incidents in very varying different capacities. Obviously, Matt, you lived it. Carl has worked with companies, clients, and then, you talk to somebody like Clark or Mackenzie that is, actually day in and day out, that's really what they do. And so we wanted to kind of pull everything together for the 2 days, close things out with that panel. So that's what I got for you, my friend.
Whew. That's a lineup. Rob, when we hear the story, it sounds like y'all crafted this to take MSPs on a journey, right? First is this discovery of turning, the auditors are in, I got to be careful. First is this discovery of turning over cards and being surprised by stuff you don't know, learning what those are from John Strand, understanding how that's going to help them in their business. But it's also helping people with this challenge that I see, which is people have 3 things. They have the bucket of what they know. You have the bucket of what you don't know. You know that because you can contextualize it to something you know. And then you have the what you don't know bucket. And so what this first lens, this first day, is taking you through a bunch of stuff you may not be familiar with, tools, words, things that you haven't involved before. But then day 2 takes that and says, okay, you now know the language, right? You understand some of these things. You understand how they work. You've labbed, you put your hands in it. You understand it more. Now let me show you what we're seeing on the back end of that, right? Let me teach you what you're actually going to have to deal with and what the parts and components of this attack chain, kill chain look like. And then you're going to step it into a legal conversation about the outcome of that, right? Then you're going to walk through with Phyllis Lee and Eric about their actual experience in this and why CIS helped solve it, and then the legal conversation, and then wrapping up with a panel. Will that panel be open for people to ask questions and get some of their big burning questions answered as well, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do Q&A at the end and have anybody ask a question. You got some phenomenal resources there. As long as time permits, as long as Rob doesn't, put down the gauntlet and say enough's enough, I think we'll be good.
You have individuals like Matt Lee on there that tend to be a little bit long-winded. You do tend to run out of time.
Not kidding me. They'll just cut me off quickly. It's okay. I'm an employee of this panel, so they just tell me to hush and it'll work out. No, I tease. I'm, Dom, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think an MSP going through this, it's worth their time? And who would you send if it was your MSP? If you had a perfect world and a normal configuration, service manager, who would you send?
I think it's worth their time and then some, right? And I would want to get anyone I could in there that's operational in the business, but there is limited seating. So if I had to pick one, if I was your typical structured MSP, it would probably be the service manager. Because I think in most MSPs, that service team is owning most of that responsibility. But if I could send multiple, I would want to send a leader and a communicator and an operator to really dive into it.
And there's another angle here too, right? And I get asked this question a lot on stage of, if I'm just starting and I can't afford to hire a CISSP or pay somebody the kind of money for a dedicated security person, how do I start? And Dom, you and I have always said, you build them from inside, right? You teach, you train, you find the one with the affinity. So if you have that person, and the way I always tell people to start is find the Matt. Find the guy that's Dom or Matt that's asking a lot of questions and saying, why are we doing it this way? This doesn't seem secure. Should we do something different? Hey, we should, and go let them learn, right? Let them go be immersed in it. Let them experience it and understand, have some of their own thoughts challenged, have some of their own understanding grown, and then build that person up, right? And that's where I see that being effective. Look at Machine Logic. Look at the Derek Schulte experience and how that's played out with his growth. Like, I'd stand next to him any day. He's a brilliant
100%.
security engineer.
He's grown so much in such a short amount of time. Yeah.
And it's because you already have the tools. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, if I could say, you asked the question to Dom, and I want to ask it to Rob. Who would you send? I'm a believer in sending the leader, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
Yes, there's going to be some hands-on stuff and things like that, but when you look at the MSPs, right, one of the biggest challenges we have as MSPs is sales, right? And if you look at something called the Challenger sale, Google it if you haven't. But
Love it.
It's one of the best selling. It's one of the best sales trainings out there, and when you look at a challenger, the reason a challenger is successful is because they teach something that prospect doesn't know, right? They know something more than they do. Because why else would I share my time and interest, right?
Right.
And so, so if I care about my business and I want to take it to the next level, I want to understand this first, because then I can go to market. Rob, that's my take. That's who I'm sending. How about you?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think, and we've referenced it a couple of times during the course of this call, and it's one of the things that I really, really love about being part of this industry is the amount we actually share with each other, and the amount that you talked about it a couple of times, Matt. And I obviously know MSPs that have fallen down. It's an immensely embarrassing thing. So in some cases, almost putting them out of business is not something they necessarily want to admit to. Yet they're willing to get on stage in front of hundreds of people and talk about why and how, just only to make everybody better as a result, as a community. And I think that's where this is all kind of stemming from and going to. And I think the challenge as well that I've kind of seen at some of these security events is it tends to be the tech, and sure, that person's critical and important, but that person isn't always necessarily the decision maker through the process. What are the fail safes that we need to set up? What are the things that we need to be thinking about that we're not thinking about? And sure, they're there and they probably understand them, but do they have a voice when they're going back? To be able to implement those certain processes. So I would agree with you, Andrew. I think it needs to be more than likely, like I would say, the decision maker, the owner within the business.
Is anybody shocked that the two technical people answered technical answers and the two sales and executive people answered executive and sales answers? I don't know if I find the irony in that palatable, but it seems accurate. So I think what we've done is identified the two personas that initially need to be involved in this type of information in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to echo one last thing with Rob. Like, think about it. If you're a business leader, you're an owner listening to this, and you're thinking, who do I want to send? Let me ask you a question. When you walk into a prospect, who do you want to be in front of? Who's going to move the needle for you? Right? Is it the technical person?
You
No
guys may have just
offense.
won the argument.
I know.
Or is it the person that can write the check? Right. So
Right.
if you're going to move the needle, the buck stops with you. And you see it all the time trying to convince people to implement the right security hygiene and controls. Right. And so that just kind of banging my head for a good way on that, Matt. So.
Rob, you want to close us out on this? Because I think Mr. Morgan went to debate in high school because he just won that argument.
Yeah.
I think, whoever you send, you're going to get value. But to the point,
right.
And it starts with security. And maybe you've just been reading the book, Andrew, of if you don't have executive buy-in, you won't succeed. Right. And I think that is kind of the way security works for both security sales as well as security operations. And I think that is a good call out for that, is you've got to understand what the troops are doing and what's being called for. You do it with every other aspect of your business. Why would you not come just because it's security? Right. Rob, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, why don't you close us out, and then we'll kick over to Dom to wrap up the show. But if you haven't signed up, sign up, come join us. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it is going to be awesome. And I've done a number of these user conferences with other organizations. I recently joined Pax8 with it's only been 3 months. Seems like 3 years, but only
Seems
been
like
there
5
for
years.
3
That's
months.
Pax8 effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to doing our first, but at the same time, this is something, again, I've done more than a dozen times, and there's a lot of people in behind the scenes here that are working very, very hard. There's a lot of money being spent on this. And we are polishing up one of the best conferences you'll go to this year. The goal is to make it one of these go-tos, cannot miss conferences. And I remember back in the day, my DISTI conferences used to be some of the more fun ones, some of the better ones, some of the more comprehensive ones, because you had the ability to go in. There was great content everywhere. You got to see all the different vendors that were there. You got to see all the different MSPs. This is not going to be any different, but it's going to be like +1, because it's, of course, Pax8, and we're going to do everything the Pax8 way of doing things. So I'm excited. 1,000 MSPs plus. We've got, I think we've already got something like 70 vendors, maybe not, maybe a little bit less than that, but it should be, for our first event, it should be absolutely phenomenal. June 11th in Denver. And, we've been talking a lot about the security lab. That's not the only persona. We have 4 other tracks that are going to matter to all the different personas for all the different people in your organization, because we recognize that we need to add value for whoever it is that you send from your organization. So I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward, and everybody on this call will be participating one way or another, and then hundreds more. So with that, I'll give it back over to you guys.
Well, thank y'all for joining us. It's awesome. You just heard it here. We went through the security event, and it took us almost an hour to talk about it, all the cool stuff that's going to be in it. There's 4 more personas. So if you're not registered for Beyond, time is closing out on you quick. You need to get registered.
37 days. It's on his whiteboard. Running out of time.
Right there behind him in blue. Yeah, 100%. So please join us. Listen, I appreciate everybody being here. Andrew and Rob, we're going to go ahead and close it out. Dom, why don't you tell everybody what they need to do and get us out of here for today?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this very special episode of the game on Pax8 Live. We really hope you enjoyed what we went over. We're super excited about Beyond and everything that comes along with it. And like Rob said, we're here to help and enable everyone you send our way. So you cannot go wrong here. With that in mind, not every episode of the game will be streamed onto LinkedIn like this one. So if you want to catch every episode of the game, make sure you go to youtube.com/Pax8Cloud. Like, subscribe, share, drop comments, all of that jazz. We love hearing from you. We want this to be a two-way show. And with that in mind, we're going to close out this week. Don't forget to join us next week right here again on Friday for the game, Thursday for Technically Unraveled, and Academy Live, and I think Craig Donovan might even have another show coming out soon. So a ton of content coming your way.
Awesome.
We'll see you next week.